Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Alison Teeder. I'm the Programme Director for Napa Arts in Care. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're joining us live via Facebook or watching back on the recordings, this is the second live event for Napa Arts in Care Week, when we're talking about the importance of the arts and creativity in care provision. We're having a fantastic week so far. Thanks so much for everyone that's sharing posts. Don't forget to share posts using the hashtag AICH2023. And please do pop your questions in the chat if you've got any questions for our speakers. And there we go. There again is the hashtag for this year. So please keep sharing us your stories. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be talking to two special guests about multi-sensory engagement, and we're going to be getting some lovely tips and ideas. So I'd love to invite to talk to me Elaine and Maria.
Hi, Alison.
Hi, ladies. Thanks
Hello.
so much for joining me. And it's a lovely, lovely topic. And actually, we've already had some interest in that topic. Just before we came in, there was a tweet from someone saying that it's art and nature was one of their favorite topics, and sharing about some lovely stuff that they're doing in a home. So fantastic.
Ooh, you must share it with us at some point.
I will do. I'll make sure you see it afterwards. So it would be lovely to hear a little bit more about both of you, about what you're doing now, but also how you started, how you got into this work. So Elaine, it would be lovely if you could share a little bit more about you.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you very much for inviting me today. So I've danced kind of all of my life, really. There's a story that often comes up around the dinner table when I'm with my parents about me coming down the stairs at 11 o'clock at night and dancing in front of my parents, and my mum kind of rolling her eyes and going to bed and just leaving me with my dad to do my performances. So I think it's kind of, carried on since then. I danced a lot with my grandma and granddad in my youth through ballroom dancing. And then when I got to the age to go to university, it wasn't really a surprise to anyone that I studied dance and visual practice at Brighton University. And following that, I went on to do dance movement therapy in Bristol. And I think for me, that was kind of a key change when I started studying dance movement therapy, because I started to understand the kind of wider possibilities of dance as something therapeutic, healing and connecting, rather than purely a kind of performance method. And during my work experience on my dance movement therapy, I worked in a psychiatric hospital, working in what was then called the geriatric ward, working alongside an occupational therapist delivering movement sessions. And that was really my green light. I think that was kind of my starting place of kind of really understanding the immediate kind of reactions and positive input that it could have. And I've kind of been doing very similar work since then. I've kind of shot off and done other things, but that's always kind of been my basis. It's been kind of really within the dance movement therapy, but thinking of the meaningful connections that you can have through movement. And I now have set up my own small tiny business, called Spin Turn Creative Movement.
Fantastic. And I think we've got the link to your YouTube film somewhere that we'll share sometime during the chat, because it's great. And that's actually how I first heard about you, Elaine, because I saw your fantastic posts and some of those YouTube films. So I'm sure we'll share that at some point. And Maria, thanks, Elaine. I mean, there's loads there, and I hope we can pull out more during the talk because it's fascinating. Maria, we go way back.
We do.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into working in this field and what you're doing now, what your interest is?
I will, and thank you again for inviting me. And Elaine, lovely to meet Elaine as well. I started off training as an aromatherapist, reflexologist back in the 90s. I was trained as a medical aromatherapist. 2 years down the line, as a parent of toddlers, I met a fellow parent, a parent link. She was probably one of the first activities peoples in London working for Central and Cecil Housing. And I think they were building an extension, they were expanding. And she says, we're really all stressed. But I think during the sessions of Parent Link, we were taught how to learn how to listen. And that was carried through my whole sort of working life, understanding how to listen. And she discovered what I did and said, you must come along and do some sessions with us. So I did. And 6 months down the line, being a wonderfully progressive and visionary person, she decided to get funding to do a project called Health Alternatives for Older People. I know I was ready to go off on sort of families and younger children. I had no experience at all about this except for people in the family, and that was it really. So we did this project, which was a fantastic project, which looked at the clinical approaches to aromatherapy, reflexology, I think Reiki. We had a whole, broad spectrum of complementary therapies. It was assessed by Dr. Sidney Jones. He was an independent assessor, and he was a psychologist and gerontologist. And he said, keep it as part of service of care and teach therapeutic principles to staff. So that was the beginning, and I was now employed. Classic way is you have your room, you do you have to invite people to come and take of your expertise in massage. But this was fantastic to have employed, be employed, and it's continued on from there to this day. That's and what I do now has been in a sense adapted, because post the project, I couldn't apply myself in the same way in a clinical fashion. So I had to learn how to work with people with dementia. That happened through training in positive communication and dementia care. And quite honestly, that was the best, because we looked at the senses, understood the senses. And I didn't need to know so much about dementia in a sense, but once I understood what happens around when people's senses aren't working in the normal fashion, it was one of those kind of moments, I thought. So what we're talking about today will be how I've found my way, weaved my way through understanding and observing what's working for people.
Brilliant. And we'll hear more about how you've adapted your practice and the way you work. What comes across from listening to both of you is you've been both working in the field pretty long time, quite a while. You've got lots of experience, but you both seem very passionate about it still. And there's so many strands coming out from what you talk about, which make me curious. What I'd love to know, and I don't think it gets talked about enough with people working in this field. Why? What keeps you there? What compels you? Because there are challenges, and we know during the last few years there have been many challenges. But what compels you? What keeps you working in the field? Maria, do you want to tell us a little bit, and then Elaine will add to that as well? What compels you about this work?
Yeah, it's quite a reflective question in itself, isn't it? Because initially you think, oh, well, I do this, this, and this, and this, and then throughout the week I was saying, oh, hang on, no, what's the real essence of it? Do you know? And I think it's how people, whether they're a massager smelling an oil, or I'm doing whatever I'm doing, which is just trying to meet and greet people and become familiar, people begin to express themselves in a way. There's smiles, there's happiness. I'm happy. I walk away from care homes feeling great, because it's such a mutual exchange of friendship, stories. Smells takes you off on all sorts of journeys, and that's just fantastic. I think there was one, a Canadian lady, and she had, I'm trying to remember the name of the oil, black spruce, that's the one. And it was a new oil for me, and I was exploring it from, it's good for the chest and all of that. But she suddenly sort of said, oh, that's taken me back to Canada, and I'm walking with the dogs in Canada. I mean, and every time then I'd see her, we'd have that journey. She'd love her massage, that's fine. And that was such a key to opening up.
So powerful, smells so powerful. And Elaine, what compels you? What keeps you working in this field? Can't hear you, Elaine.
You could have superimposed my face then onto Maria, because I think a lot of what she said was really similar. You say, I think you said things like friendship, and sorry, I'm probably taking different words here, but friendship and community. And I think for me also there's a place for, I feel very heard and very welcomed when I go into a lot of care spaces. I feel like the real roots of my work and the content of my work hasn't really changed over the years. It's very much about, self-expression and movement, encouraging people to move. I think my values around dignity, inclusion, love, I think they're always the same. And I feel very strongly, that self-expression and creativity should really be a human right for people. And I love being part of the picture of supporting people to be able to self-express and to convey their thoughts and feelings. Sometimes when that opportunity might not have been available otherwise. So I feel very honoured a lot of the time to be able to be part of that picture and to be able to offer that in people's lives is I, again, like you said, I often come out feeling really well, feeling really glad that I've been able to have those interactions with people. So that's why I do what I do.
I'm so pleased to share that, because it certainly shares my experience, and it's lovely to put that out there of how rewarding and fulfilling this kind of work would be. I'd like to kind of dig a little bit deeper with you both, if that's okay, and talk about some of the learning for you from doing this work. Again, you've both been doing it for quite some time. Elaine, could you tell us a little bit more about some learnings, either about yourself or about the people you work with, that have come from your practice?
Yeah, that's quite a huge question. I feel like I have learnt to reflect. I think often being around older people really invites, the possibility and the need for reflection. But I think also in myself, I feel like that, that kind of maybe desire that I have sometimes to move on from one thing to another, it doesn't kind of work in these environments. So that need to kind of process and reflect and really meet people at the place that they are, rather than the place that maybe I think somebody should be or other people think that they should be. So it's very much around kind of pulling down and being very present. So that sometimes goes against my natural instincts as somebody who has the possibility to be a bit reactive. So I think, working with older people and working in care situations does really support that reflective time. I think also I have learned about the importance of community and the importance of communication as well, but also the importance of solitude as well. I think as somebody who often encourages people to come together, I also notice the need for people to have solitude and quietude as well, and that those places feed each other. And I noticed that as somebody who is a busy person, has young children, has a busy life, need that more in myself as well. So I think I see a lot of those things reflected in myself and in my work.
I think that the sort of idea of a reflective pause that came out a little bit in our chat yesterday, and how beneficial that is for all of us, and for being really, really listened to and in the moment. Maria, do you want to add anything to that in terms of your learning from your work, either about yourself or the people you work with?
All of what you're saying, I struggled when I had to change into adapting, to be quite honest, because oh God, I'm meant to be a clinician, but I can't do it that way. How am I going to do it? But that was the biggest learning, and it's ongoing, because I then began to value the smaller things. Like, for instance, people would say, well, older people don't have a good sense of smell, and with people with dementia, you can't always identify pain. So can I address it clinically in that way? No, I can't, because even the staff sometimes don't understand when somebody is in pain. But actually, I then began to value more and more my approach of inviting people to smell, and I have a specific kind of technique to do that I'm comfortable with, which is safe as well, because I don't want somebody taking a bottle of oil from me, but I have to be careful how I do it. But I've worked that out, and people just, and I support that. Maybe if somebody has a weak sense of smell, with using my iPad with the picture of the oil. So again, using the visual sense to complement the scent. I think it's just been ongoing, Alison. It's a big question. It is a big question.
Well, I'm going to pull out a bit more from both of you, I think, because what I think would be really helpful, I hope that we've got maybe some care homes, some care settings and staff that are going to watch this. And I think it'd be really nice if there's some simple ideas or resources that we can share with them, ways of bringing multi-sensory engagement into care settings. And we've talked about smell, we've talked about movement and touch and visual senses as well. Elaine, it would be lovely to share. I know, we've got a lovely resource that we can share from you, but what are some simple ideas that you would like to share with us?
I think that idea we were talking about of reflection. So this really came out for me after making a film I made with two older people called Light Gatherers, which we'll talk about a bit more later. But after making the film, I really had that question of how can I really be sure, or how are the voices of the people that I'm working with really heard within the work, within the creative process of making? So it's not always me going in and delivering like, this is what we're doing today. It's like, how can, in a meaningful way, how can the ideas and thoughts and stories and lives of the people you're working with get kind of embroidered into the fabric of the work that you're making? So this is a real question for me. So following the film, I worked alongside the two people who were in the film, both of whom live in a care home and both of whom have a dementia diagnosis. And we spent time, they were working alongside me as co-researchers into building a resource, looking into how to how to answer that question, really. Are there ways that we can support people to reflect on the creative process? So it was wonderful. We spent about 3 months, 4 months, like really chewing the fat and looking at all these different things and throwing things out and coming up with lots of ideas. But also another reason, and we'll have a look at it a couple of the things in a minute, but another reason is because often I can't go into care settings maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, sometimes once a month, and so much can have happened, and people's health can have changed, or staff have left, and there's it can be a very changeable environment. So for me, that idea of transitions, like when you come into a place, how do you kind of check in really of what's going on? How do you get a feel of what's happening? And also at the other side of a session or an interaction, how do you transition out as well? How do you check in that people are okay? Or is there anything that people want to tell me that maybe they weren't able to in that larger space? So this is a possibility. This is a resource which I'm hoping there will be a link to somewhere if anyone would like. It's Tools for Reflection and Creativity, but was a mini commission by Bold Scotland. And I'm just going to share 2 of them, but there's lots of different possibilities in there, and for different art forms as well. So one that I use a lot, it's a mirroring movement, and it's based on the work of Marion Chase, something called the Chasian Circle. And it's so simple. You're really asking somebody to show you with their body how they are feeling at that moment, or what would your body like to do right now? If it could do anything, what would it like to do? And I do this in a lot of my sessions, and some people just literally like that. And you don't have to answer, you don't have to respond, you don't have to say, oh, does that mean you're tired? Because it might not. It might mean that they have pain in their neck. But, they're just like, okay. Or some people, I often do this one because I'm often feeling a bit twitchy because I'm normally doing lots of things. Or some people might stretch, or some people might not do anything. And then you mirror the movement, and potentially the group mirror the movement. And it can be a very powerful way of being seen and being heard and being communicated without the use of language. Because for some people, language isn't always available. And for some people, language can be difficult as well. So it can be a possibility. It's not something for everybody, but it can be a possibility. And I always offer up, if you don't want to do anything, obviously that's really fine. Some people move, some people don't. Some people feel more comfortable doing it with their eyes closed. So mirroring movement. I'm going to share one more, if that's okay. I'm looking at Alison. Is that all right?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Thank you. And I've got the world. I always carry the world in my bag. And I love this one. It's very, very powerful. It's hand it round, often at the end of a session, but sometimes at the beginning, or sometimes one-to-one when I'm chatting with people. And the question is to invite people to say, this is my world, and my world is. So you've just shared this hour experience together. So, how is your world right now? My world is exhausted. Somebody said last week, my world is full of people. Someone said, my world is confused. You don't have to add anything. You don't have to reply. It's just an opportunity for people to share how their world is. And I think using an object can take a little bit of the, what's the word? The directness away, because often people concentrate on looking at the world. So they're sometimes talking to the world. But yeah, it's also just quite a good way of connecting that idea.
That's a lovely idea, yes, and the globe it's a lovely talking piece. The objects are a great curiosity. They spark conversations, don't they?
Yeah, and I use this one quite a lot, and it's always different. Every time it's some people say the same thing, some people say very different things every time. So your world changes, of course it does. And I think if you did it at the beginning of a session and at the end of a session, I imagine it would change as well. So those are just 2 things that I use, not all the time, but there may be possibilities just to check in, not making assumptions that everybody is enjoying what you are doing, and it just gives people a little bit more autonomy in the work that's happening. So those are my offerings.
Thank you, and I hope we can share the link. If I'll share it on social media as well. Maria, I know that you also have some tools of your trade, which you developed along the way out of necessity and curiosity.
And I think I'm going to add to my tools from Elaine, because I love the world bit and the mirroring, because I teach Qigong, and I've recognized that mirroring with people, but the idea of somebody being heard, fantastic. I love it. And I think for me, people knowing who I was when I came into a care home was actually a story by a lady who saw me coming in, because for convenience and safety in the care home, carrying around my essential oils, I need to have them with me. And I'd have a little stool. I often think I'm a little leprechaun when I have my little stool, and people kind of like that idea when I do. And it's all about approach and how people see you. And one of the residents saw me coming in with my magic basket, which it's a sensory basket which I hold my essential oils in, and she knew this. So I have my little box of oils, and you open up the little box of oils for people and select oils. But basically, what I hadn't realized what it meant to have this key, this identity, and even the clothes I wear. So the magic basket, I think there's a link to it, because in there's lots of curiosities and things, including just little openers with people, that, you know, having the little puppets and different things. You can put anything you want in there. I also have a little organza bag with my essential oils in. And sometimes I might go around sort of introducing people, taking an oil and maybe a little pad and putting a drop of oil in there and seeing how people take to it. And the staff as well love this, because when I come into a care home, I'll actually introduce the oils to ask the staff what oils they'd like. They'll put it on a little pad and put it down their front. I say down the front, and they sit there or just sit and smile. You could never get them to stop, but you will if you've got them to pick their favorite oil. They're there. And then it's like the Pied Piper, because they'll find me wherever I am in the in the home, and put their hand out and say, one of those. And I thought, great. And that was one of the key learnings, is these simple ways. The other thing was in on-call books. Managers say, please put something in the on-call book. I mean, everything is and then sort of you open the book and it's like this, it naturally wafts. And then I have using the oils to, even I do an art session. So I actually have a little jar of water, and I've only recently done this. And I thought, oh, this is really nice. You open the lid and you have these wafting oils coming. It's absolutely, so that's really for the paint, water and the paintbrush and all that business.
Oh, lovely. Bringing it into the art. I love that. It's really multi-sensory. And we must say at this point that the only oil that's safe to use neatly on the skin is lavender, and that you're a trained aromatherapist, and the oils are chemical. People need to be careful.
I would only teach how to use the oils in the environment for reminiscing as well. It opens up stories and storytelling. There's many other things you can put oils on and use. I have a variety of little organza bags, which Christmas time you can use pine cones and other things, put them in the bag and hang them on people's frames, or I don't like calling them frames. We need a new word. They're friends. They're friend frames. The walkers, you know.
And you and I have talked a lot about gardens, and the use of the garden is so underused in care homes. Not all of them have them, but I think at some point we'll share. There's a wonderful resource from Debbie Carroll and Steps Change Design about why don't we go into the garden, and anyone looking to do more stuff around using their garden, encouraging nature activities. Again, I'll share the link to that in social media. I can see time is rushing away from us, ladies, but I want to get some more. I love just these glimpses of, you know, your work, and I'd like to get a little bit more, some stories from your work and the people you've worked with, or the learning for you. Elaine, did you want to share some sort of reflections, positive stories from your practice?
Yeah, I mean, out of all the questions, I actually found this the hardest because you know, I could probably go on for days. But what I would like to talk about, which I mentioned very briefly earlier, was the experience of making a film with two women who both live in a care home, and the film's called Light Gatherers. And Light Gatherers came about during lockdown. So, like many other freelancers who work in care, I lost all of my work. So not only did I lose all of my work, I lost friendships and I lost communities, and it was really difficult. And I think being in that position as a freelancer, I didn't, you know, I wasn't a person that could make contact. So it was a very strange, you know, it was a very strange place. And then the possibility for a commission through a dance organization came up, and it was the remit was to make links with or to create a piece of work with the communities that you'd lost. So for me, that was obviously the care homes that I had been working with. So I invited one care home who I'd been working with for a long, long time, if there was anyone who might want to work with me. And there were these two women, Jill and Mary. And I worked with them over 6 months doing Zoom sessions, creative movement Zoom sessions. And it was all so new. I'd never worked with people really creatively on Zoom before. I'd never worked with people with dementia diagnosis through Zoom before. I had no idea how it was going to go. I'd never made a film like this before. I was working with 2 other artists as well. I'd never worked there before. So it was all just like new. But it felt really important. It felt so important to make connection. And I think that's why I kind of wanted to share it as a story, really, just the idea of being brave, being bold, trying something new. You know, I feel my mantra with my work is that there are always possibilities for connection. And I really believe that no matter, you know, what somebody's situation, I think there are always roots in. So for me at this point where I was just, you know, I was like, what am I going to do? This was a possibility. And the connections that I was able to have with both of the women were just wonderful and really reignited my belief and my desire in my work. So I would send little packages. I would deliver them sort of to the corner of the care home, and you'll see here they had one of them. This is Jill, and she's unwrapping the lavender. So it was lavender from my garden, and I would send that to her, and that's her unwrapping it and then telling me about her garden and smelling it, and we both unwrap it together. And then I sent, I don't think there's a photo of it here, but I sent Mary a ballroom dancing shoe. So she had one of my shoes and I had the other shoe. So we would, and then she told me about her time doing foxtrot and, you know, blah, 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 blah. So then we generated this sort of, you know, this sensory film really, which was about, you know, kind of around lack of contact, but also very much around what brings us together. And this image here of the record player, that was around Jill, who loved jazz music, so we would listen to jazz together. And yes, it was just very much you know, that for me the story of something that you know, when you think that there aren't ways in, you just, you know, you find a way, and you build a community around those difficulties, those challenges, and you find solutions. So that's why I wanted to share Light Gatherers.
I love the idea of a shoe, and the stories that sparks off, and getting this thing through the post. And I would really encourage people to look at this wonderful film, Light Gatherers. Again, we'll share the link in social media, because please watch it. It's a really lovely watch. Maria, a positive story. I think you're going to share something around Rose. Is that right? I think you.
Yes.
So a story from your practice, some reflections, but I think you were telling me something lovely to do with rose oil.
Well, Rose was late stage dementia and wasn't easy to connect with, really. And she also had a clenched fist. And one of the stuff, because basically I can't remember the technical term for it, but it would clasp in like that, and the nails would get long and maybe cut into her hand. And they were looking for ways. And sometimes people would try and prise the hand open and distress people with doing that. So I was thinking through how I would approach it, and I sort of approached by singing, because we kind of, all singing and dancing comes into everything in some kind of small way, or they're all these little connections that connect you with people and make it easier for them to accept what you're about to do, or give you permission to move closer. They're your ways of guiding yourself through something, and they're all the multitude of tools. But I approached her by singing her name Rose, and I approached her from the side, and sort of I felt like she was letting me in. There was a flicker of her eyes, and I eventually just stroked her hand on the back to kind of, because if you do that, your fingers kind of come up, you begin to loosen the hand, but the suggestion is you're stroking gently. And that worked. And I'd made a blend with rose oil in it. So I continued the rose, it was just lovely. And then I eventually massaged just very gently, let a few drops, and then showed it to the staff. And basically the care staff found that so useful, because it was a difficult job. So that was a very practical thing to do. And that's where aromatherapy can do these. The homes I visit are care homes, they're not nursing homes. So, but there is a wide variety of things that can be helpful in nursing homes around aromatherapy too.
And I think you talked a little bit about palliative care as well. Again, it was different oils and changing the atmosphere in the space, making it a more pleasant space.
It was lovely, because what happened with the oil, and really all I did was, I didn't choose lavender, because lavender, the family were visiting, this woman was dying, and I actually went in, and I didn't quite know what to do, to be quite honest. I thought, well, shall I massage her hands or what? So I sat talking to her about the pictures on the wall until I felt what I needed to do. And what I needed to do, I thought, I've got bergamot oil, and I sprinkled some bergamot around. But I left, came back later, and there was a member of staff sitting with this woman, just holding her hand. And she said, well, I was walking by doing something, and I picked up on the smell, and it drew her in. And it was a peaceful, it was just delightful. And that's the simplicity of what you learn. And you think, oh gosh, that's really important. It doesn't have to be this. It doesn't, we're so full of so many things we could do, but actually just that one thing. And we've done it in the past before, and people and family have really appreciated having it. Just created a lovely atmosphere, a respectful atmosphere. But that's, thank you for.
Yes, I think we've only scratched the surface, really. But I mean, just what's come across the power of sensory, and to really think about sensory engagement, be that movement, be that touch, be that smell, and just to give time for it, and to be in the moment, and to be guided by the person. We have got really are running out of time, ladies, and I'm going to be really mean to you, because I'm going to ask you to maybe even in one sentence each, which is very mean. But I'd love to hear, going forward, from all you've learned, all you've gone through during COVID and the challenging time and developing your work. How do you see your work going forward? Where would you like to be, or what do you think needs to happen going forward? Elaine?
I ain't going to do one sentence. I'll do my best. I want to continue doing what I do, but I want to do it with quality. I want to do it with meaning. I want to just increase my skills, as I go along. And it's really interesting talking to Maria and hearing about that idea of simplicity. I've started doing one-to-one sessions, so it's really, really inspiring hearing what you've got to say, because I think for me also there is a place. I do a lot of group sessions, but also finding ways of doing more bespoke sessions with people, and that idea of simplicity as well, I think, is really important. So
I look forward to seeing. I love your post. Please look at Elaine's post, Spin Turn Creative Movement, on social media. They're very inspiring and uplifting, I find them. Maria, how your work going forward? You've been on a journey. I've been lucky enough to be on it with you for some of the way. How do you see your work going forward?
How do I see it going forward? I see I do so much one-to-one with people, but one-to-one in a lounge and where everybody, you can see it affects the staff and everything. And I'm really interested. We did a program called Nature and Nurture, which was an elaborate tea, which worked through all the senses. But what it did, it attracted everybody into that room, staff, everybody. They just put everything down and came into this, and I can't go into it now, but it was and I've had one of the members of staff only the other day actually say, oh, can we have that back? That was great. But I would like to, I'm a little bit also concerned that essential oils are being used in care homes but not safely. Or people, they can be regarded as perfumes and, get a bit liberal with them, and actually they're chemicals and we need to be careful. And I think I've done one training session with somebody on how to use them in the environment, and that was lovely. And I'm also hoping to clone me and get my fellow aromatherapists working in care. I could do inductions I'm not interested in teaching aromatherapy per se. I want to take the experience I've had and actually say, hey, this is absolutely fantastic work. And particularly as you get, not necessarily as you get older. I've been really fortunate to spend 30 years doing this, and it's just great. It draws on you in so many different ways. And Elaine, I'm sure you can feel like this as well. You've said it more or less just then. You're curious yourself about how you can, how could I do that differently? Or how, and your own feelings, everybody's feelings come into it. And it's just fantastic. I love it. There you are.
Thank you both so much, and sorry for being mean, trying to cram so much in. I wonder if there are any questions from the audience. Any questions to share? Doesn't look like it. Oh, there we go. One last one. How would you imagine arts in care if there were no limits in terms of budget? Again, we don't have much time, but was there anything, any final thing? What would you really like to see in terms of arts and creativity in care homes? Elaine?
I think for me, it's often about access, and, that somebody's situation doesn't, have to be a barrier, that there should be possibilities for everybody. I mean, also a very holistic approach as well. Gardens, swimming pools, beautiful food, yoga.
Absolutely.
But, just seeing care in a wider sense, and seeing well-being in a wider sense. So accessibility, not being any limits on that, and a more holistic approach.
Wonderful. And final words from Maria. Anything, if you could say, what would you like in terms of creativity in care homes? we've talked a bit about the community of the care home, involving everyone. Anything else you'd like to add?
I've kind of shifted the whole care home upside down and actually seeing it more as being in the community. I know that's bad. I sort of feel like we need more of the community in care.
Absolutely. Less boundaries and more connections, more creative connections.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I hope we've left people wanting more. And if you want to find out about either Elaine or Maria's work, we'll be sharing it on social media. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alison.
You're doing wonderful work. Carry on sharing the senses. And yes, thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you both again.